Hi, everyone, and thanks for being here. I'm super excited. I said that in my email because, we have three great professionals with us today. Three great, three amazing engineers, producers. Becky's a vocal coach, women in the industry that have been, breaking ground pretty much, as most women are in this industry. Breaking ground and doing things that, at the at I like to say that they are not female producers, engineers. They are just great engineers, producers. Period. It doesn't matter the gender. And I'm super happy and super stoked to have him here. We have Chrissy Tignor, Becky Willard, and we'll have soon Natalia Perelman from Argentina too. Maybe she's confused with the time, but let me open the floor for any question you have. Please put it on the chat so I can kind of moderate it as we go. Uh, Let me introduce Chrissy and Becky, and then please let us know. Let us know how you got into this first, and then when, how, just your beginnings in this environment, in this industry. Chrissy.
I was gonna let Becky go first, but
Okay, okay.
okay, I can go first. Okay. Yeah, so my name is Chrissy Tignor. I am a producer, engineer, educator, and yeah, I guess I started in this industry. I actually started in the UK. I went and did my master's at the University of Westminster in London, and that's when I first started working as a freelancer, as an engineer and as a producer. And when I was there, I worked with the first artist that I had a single with was an artist named Kamille, with a K. If you look her up, she's done a lot of really, actually, she just won a Grammy for Dua Lipa's album now, which is amazing. She's just a really incredible, like another just amazing woman in the industry that you should know. But actually, we did our first single together, however many years ago, way back in the UK. And that's really where I started doing production and making beats and producing tracks for artists, was really with her. And from there, though, I mean, really, my background was in engineering. I studied that first. I went to the Hartt School of Music, if any of you have ever heard of it, in Hartford, Connecticut. I studied music production technology and composition. So my background was very much in classical music and a lot in like composition of classical music, but also recording classical music. That was really where my focus was, at least at the beginning. And then I moved to London in 2008 to do my master's because it was the first financial crash. So I was like, I got to get out of here. And I went and did a master's there. Really only did the master's so I could move to England because I just wanted to move to a different place. And there, I actually ended up working in the industry. While I was there, I worked at Tin Pan Alley Studios, Rollover Studios, Eastcote Studios, and I had syncs with TLC, BBC, Discovery Channel, in terms of instrumentals. And then I was really planning on staying in the UK, to be honest with you. And then good old immigration happened. Any of you who maybe are from another country or have lived in another country know how that can be sometimes, and basically changed the rules for freelancers in the middle of my work visa. So I went from being able to actually continue my career there to actually having to come back here to Boston, which I'm from Massachusetts originally, with literally no connections, like nothing, no career, like had to start over again. And when I started to, kind of get back into the US and get used to being here again, I started working at Sanctum Sound, which was actually used to be in South Station, close to South Station here in Boston. And it was there that I worked with Alex Clare. I also worked with Bastille, and I really, really liked it there. They don't exist anymore, sadly. But in the time that I was working there, I also got the job at Berklee College of Music here in Boston. I've been teaching in the contemporary writing and production department for 8 years. And I also teach with Berklee Online as well. So that's kind of like leading up to this point. But like the biggest thing, I guess, that I've been doing recently, um, besides focusing on education and also doing my own freelance work, my biggest project is called Audio Upcycle, which was a studio that I built in the Dominican Republic, which is actually how me and Socrates met, was because of this project. We basically, this started in 2017. I went down there, did a lecture at the National Conservatory of Music, and realized that there was just no equipment, not even a computer for recording. So I heard some of the best musicians I've ever heard on any trip for Berkeley, to be honest, like Dominican musicians, still to this day, they're just amazing. And I just felt like I wanted their music to be recorded. Like I felt like there needed to be some sort of, legacy there, because the musicians were so amazing. So it started off by me sending my iMac, my old iMac that I wasn't using, down in a suitcase with a student, which is how it started. And after that, like just we've been building ever since. So the whole studio, now we have an 8-track studio down there, and well, 8 multi-track into Logic we run, and everything's built out of donations. Every single part of it is totally donated, and we just recorded an album in 2019 when I was down there for like a 6-week period of time. And I can post the link here if you want to listen to it. All Dominican music from the city of Santo Domingo, recorded with the students at the National Conservatory of Music. So I definitely work with that now. Like pretty much this is like my heart and soul. I love it so much. Like absolutely adore it. And yeah, I guess that's sort of my history. I don't know if you have any other questions about it, feel free to ask. But yeah, Becky.
Wow, such an impressive biography that you have and incredible work that you're doing. Um, I I came about becoming a producer in a total roundabout way. It was never my intention because back when, I was first going to college, there was no such thing as, I mean, we didn't even have home computers. That's how old I am. I graduated in 1989 and there were no contemporary music programs. All I knew was that I loved music. I loved to sing. I had been writing songs from the time I was, pretty young and had learned how to multi-track my voice using tape recorders, just bouncing back and forth. I mean, we're talking rudimentary. And I went to college thinking I was, well, I'm not really good enough to be a professional opera singer, and I'm not sure if that's what I want to do anyway. Um, and again, back in this day, there really was you in music, you were either a teacher or you were a classical musician, vocalist, and those were the only options. So I decided to go into education and thought I might be a choir teacher in high school. And, it just, I started teaching voice lessons and started working with singers and helping them write better songs. And that was really what I was passionate about for a long time. And then eventually I started working with a producer as sort of collaboratively, where I was working with the artists on their songs and their vocals. And then he was working on producing their music. Then I learned how to record their vocals. Then I learned how to edit their vocals and tune them. And eventually all the while I'm watching this producer work, I just learned by looking over his shoulder. And very touchy-feely. So if you wanted to have a discussion about anything real technical, I'd be like, I don't know, let me just put my hands on the knobs and I'll figure it out. But I can't really tell you what's happening. So I'm very, very much learned how to become a producer by intuition and feel and my musical gut, and by just learning how to listen and to hear really critically. And now I've built my business mostly working with local artists and a lot of YouTubers. I have a huge clientele of people who are creating music all the time on YouTube. For a while it was covers, but then YouTube kind of made that hard for those artists to make any kind of a living, just because they changed the algorithms, and so the covers weren't being found anymore. But now it's about YouTube channels that are growing their brand by creating music that fits their brand. So I do a lot of that stuff. I do some work for Sync, which is, film and TV. And then some just artists that are trying to navigate the business and become independent artists making a living. I work with a handful of really talented artists in that realm too. So that's me in a nutshell.
Pretty cool. I think Natalia is definitely lost in time. Uh, she sent me a message earlier today, so we'll see. So um, now you've been through all this. I mean, it's a difficult career, no matter what, no matter the gender it's a difficult career. But for you girls, it's particularly difficult because it's a very male-dominated environment. I have a question from Amanda Davis. She's asking, has identifying as a female being a hurdle to get over in your field of work? If so, how? And you can go either one.
I can go ahead and jump in on that because I've been asked that question a lot. Like, have you felt like you've been discriminated against, or has it been harder for you to, make movement as a female producer? And my answer is no, I never feel like I've been discriminated against. What for me was holding me back was the fact that I didn't know that was even an option for me. Which is why I love participating in these kind of panels to educate these young up and coming, to show you that yes, there are women that are creating music and making sick beats. And here I am, like, I'm 49, I'm going to be 50 this year. So if you saw me in the grocery store, I'd just look like, a regular mom. I'm actually now a grandma. And yet I can make sick beats, you know what I mean? So it's really about visibility for anybody, for all of you to know, like, oh, she's doing it, I can do it. So for me, it was my own getting over my own mindset that said, oh, that's not something that you should do because you're a woman for whatever reason. Getting over those limiting beliefs. So that's why I'm here, is to also help you guys kind of rethink your career paths.
That's awesome, Becky. I just want to jump onto that too, because I think that visibility is one of the biggest parts of it, actually. I know that, like, even in my generation and when I was in school, I never once saw in a book or on a video or even talked about any female engineers or producers. Like, I never saw them. I never heard about them, but then, obviously they exist. Like, they're definitely there. I mean, and one of the struggles that I really had with that, I mean, to kind of like jump onto the biggest question, which is like, as identifying as female, um, is that a problem? I mean, I've definitely faced a lot of not necessarily discrimination. I believe that yes, I have been discriminated against. I think, um, but overall, I would say that the biggest problem that I face was actually like getting into my own head more so than someone else getting into my head. So like, while there have been like some situations that I would call like discriminatory, that has happened at least in my career. um, I haven't let that define my career at all. That's one thing, but also I think I got into my head a lot and limited myself because I was comparing myself to other people, or I felt like an imposter just because I didn't see anybody who looked like me. Like when anytime that I've been put into a position, for example, of maybe I get like a really good gig or a really good job or something, and I used to look around and I'm like, do I deserve to be here? Like, I'm young, I'm a woman. Like, I don't know. I shouldn't even be in this space. I'm not wanted here. If I don't see someone like me, it means I'm not wanted here. And what that would do for me is it would keep me from like speaking out when I knew the answer, even in school. Like when I knew the answer of something, I was like, oh, but I couldn't possibly. How could I know? I don't see anybody else like me knowing. Like, should I know? And it's very internal. And I think the biggest like change that I made, at least around that, was not allowing myself to limit myself, just like accepting that part of me as like a positive thing. And not just because I don't see people doing it all around doesn't mean that I don't deserve to be doing it too. And I love what Becky said too, just about visibility. Like it's been a huge focus of mine too, to that make it more visible that there is diversity in music, not just with women, but non-binary folks, just like gender diversity in general. It does exist. It's just a matter of whether those are the faces you see in your textbooks and in your videos and your educational content, which I think this is why I'm so grateful to be here too. And thank you to Socrates for putting this together, because it's important to show that there are women who are doing it. So yeah, thank you again. I'm so happy to be here because of that.
Well, I am super happy to have you, like I said before. But the thing, what I see, I see your point with that. Let me go to gallery for me for a second. Um, for years, you saw, only a few people, a few women in this business, Sylvia Massy or somebody like that, and then you looked, it was like nobody else is doing this. It seemed like it, but of course it's not like that. But it seemed like it. But now we see more. I think we see younger people getting into that business because they see people like you, and I think that that's important. Okay, I have another one from Allison. What advice would you have for young people, female or otherwise, looking to get into this industry?
I can go advice. Gosh, I think it took me a long time to really learn to listen to my heart. I mean, that sounds absolutely cliche and cheesy. I was just having this conversation with a woman who is running one of these huge, massive YouTube channels as a family. They have millions and millions of viewers and subscribers. And, you know, she already has a staff of like 7 people, and she's already maxed out again and needs to hire someone. And she wants to hire me to be like the music person. I'm like, I can't do that full time for your channel. But anyway, I just was, telling her anything that doesn't spark joy, if you've watched that Marie Kondo thing, anything that isn't bringing you happiness, then leave it behind. Let it fall by the wayside. And the reverse of that is things that really matter to you. Make sure that you give yourself those gifts. Like I love being a wife, and I have stepchildren. And so I love being part of a family. That's such a huge priority for me. So I balance my life where, if people are trying to call me at 9 o'clock at night or want to do a session at 9 at night, I'm like, I'm sorry, my husband needs to get to bed early. I run my house, and my studio is in my house, so that I have to have these boundaries. So it's like finding what is really um, the thing that makes you happy. Make sure that you find that and listen to your gut. Even early on, your gut is trying to tell you, this is what I meant to do, or this is not right for me. And see if you can follow those paths, even if maybe common sense says, no, that's that's too risky, or no, you got to have your this degree first before you can do that. Follow your gut, and trust that that will take you where you belong.
I like that too. I think I love the spark joy thing because that's my trick for my hard drive organization, if anyone wants to know. Everyone have a hard drive that's just filled with half finished ideas, right? So here's my thing. If it has a bounce, it's good to listen to. If it has no bounce, it goes away no matter how old it is, right? So I'm like, bye-bye, no bounce, and it was never worth it. But if it has a bounce, that's how I decide. Like if it still sparks joy, even if it's just a little like beat, maybe it's a loop, maybe it's like some strange idea from like 8 years ago, but it still sounds really cool. And if it sparks joy, I keep it. And that's how I organize my hard drives. But I think it's important too, like, this kind of goes into collaboration as well, I think, because I think like not just about like following your heart, which I agree with totally too, but like working with people and collaborating with others that like are on the same page as you. That could mean in terms of your values, that could be just in the type of music that you do. And I think that like collaborating healthfully, like overall, just in terms of conversations of who you work with, is a really good piece of advice that I feel like I didn't get, especially when I was first going out in the industry, because I like I said, I dealt a lot with feeling like, do I belong here? I should just sign this thing. Or should I, maybe ask for more money than this? No, maybe I shouldn't. And I think that that all really comes from, it goes again, like advocating for yourself is another thing, like making sure that whatever agreement or contract you sign or collaboration you enter into is something that you feel comfortable with that person or that organization. I think that's really important as well.
Cool, thank you. I know Natalia came in. She, like I said, she was lost in time.
Sorry about that. I thought it was like an hour later. That's the thing. I thought it was like 6 o'clock here. And so I was making some time right here, anxious to get in.
No, so
About this.
Natalia, no problem. Please introduce yourself. Let them know what you do, who you are, and then we'll go to some of the questions with you too.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I like to say that I am very honored to be here. I already learned so much. Listen to you guys, Becky and Chrissy. It's very nice to be part of this evening here. And well, I'm a music producer. I'm a recording and mixing engineer. I've been in the Argentinian industry for 20 years now. And when I started, I also thought like Chrissy was saying, do I belong here? It was very, very, very rough times. There were no women in the recording studios. And that didn't matter to me. Because I really felt from the guts that was what I wanted to do. And I kept on no matter what. First assistant in recording studios, then recording. I did all the way up. Assisting like for 2-3 years in a row. Then I started recording. Then the opportunity came up and started mixing. I was like for 10 years or so making records for Sony Argentina. And then I became an independent producer and mixing engineer mainly. And still today, there are some days that I wonder if I still belong, if this is my thing. Sometimes I feel out of place in some events, in some sessions, but you have to listen to your guts. That's something that I completely share with Chrissy and with Becky. And I'm here to answer as much as I can, because, well, English, as you can notice, is not my first language, but I can manage.
Thank you, Natalia. Natalia is amazing also, and I'm super glad to have her here today. So I have more questions for you girls. Let's see. I have Ryan is asking, has there ever been a time where you were working on a project and felt way in over your head or didn't have the confidence to do it, like happens all the time? How did you overcome or fake it? How do you gain confidence? Any of you.
I can answer that. Yeah, many times that happened to me, especially, big recording sessions where you can have to record like a whole band, like in a live situation. And you have to fake it until it's true. You have to show confidence, especially with artists and with musicians, and you'll find your way. You have to rely on people who can help you there in those situations, maybe assistants in the studio, or maybe members of the band, but you have to show confidence. That's the key.
I love this question because I feel like this is also one of the ways I figured out one of my strengths, which is troubleshooting. And like for a while, like I would freak out like at pretty much any type of task in front of me because I would be so concerned that I didn't know how to do it. And then all of a sudden I'd realize I did know how to do it and be like, oh, that must have been wrong. Like I made a mistake. That's like a fluke, right? I would think to myself, like, oh, you figured it out this time. But after a while I realized like, wow, like, okay, no, I can figure this stuff out. And I think confidence is a big part of it. My favorite story of when this happened was when I got a job working in France, and I showed up to the studio, and it was a really cool job actually. It was a like summer camp where kids from all over the world could come and make music together, and my job was to record them and also do the live sound for the event. And this has been a very common thing with my career as well, is that I figured out literally how to do live sound because of this exact question. Because it was like everybody needed a live sound engineer, and like, yet nobody knew how to do it. And like, it's somehow every time I got hired to do something, they're like, yeah, you're going to do live sound too. You know that, right? And I was like, monitor mixes? What? Like, I don't know what that is. And so like pretty much every single one of like these jobs have kind of like rolled all these responsibilities into one until I realized I had a strength in doing that. But anyway, the favorite story is the France story. So I arrive at this beautiful farmhouse in France, and the guy who owns the studio, which is where this whole thing is taking place, is in Hong Kong. He was in Hong Kong at the time. I'd never been there in my life. I walked in, I plugged in a mic cable into input number 1, and it showed up in Logic as 15. And I was like, oh no, 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 no. Everything was wired through the walls. So it was like impossible for me to follow any sort of signal path. I must have sat there. The kids were supposed to arrive the next day. I just stayed up the whole night, literally plugging into every single thing, seeing where it came up, making a note, figuring it out, putting this here, doing this, so that when the kids came in the next day, I would just be like, all right, well, don't ask any questions about why that number doesn't line up. I can't tell you, but this is what you look for. I don't know why it doesn't do that, but this is where you plug it in and it's going to work. And it was this like crazy, crazy experience of like, all right, well, I'm just going to stay up all night and figure it out. But it does take confidence knowing that you can figure it out. So like sometimes you don't even have a chance to fake it. Like you just sort of have to do it. But I think the confidence isn't always faking it, I don't think either. Like if you just believe like, all right, well, no matter what happens, as long as you can figure out even a general workaround to any situation, if you can just figure out gear, even like on its most basic level, sometimes that can give you the confidence to like enter those situations. I heard Whitney Tabor. Do you know Whitney? She's with Girls Make Beats. And she made a really cool comment about knowing lingo as well, like understanding terminology. It kind of goes the same way with like even just understanding general signal flow. If you can understand that, like when you send a signal from a mic down a cable into something in the wall, well, where does it go from there? And then how can, if it's not coming up where you think it's supposed to, how can you follow that signal back and figure out where it's supposed to be? And I think like understanding not just lingo or terminology, but just even the basics of audio can take you a really, really long way.
I agree with that. Becky, anything else you want to add, or we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I'll just quickly add that I agree with Chrissy and Natalia. For me, all of my work is in the box, in the computer. And so for me, it's always been, hey, can you create a song that sounds like this. And sometimes it's like we're recreating the exact track, and we're talking like K-pop productions that are very heavy and detailed. And for a while, I would just say yes. And I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I would say yes. And the more that I did this recreation of tracks, the better my ears were getting, the better I was getting as a creative producer, not just someone who could, recreate someone else's productions. But I would say that because I was in that situation where I was taking any work that was coming my way. If people wanted to pay me to recreate a K-pop track, I said yes. Even though I wasn't sure how to do it, I just figured out a way to do it. And that really, really increased my skills. So not only was it scary, it pushed me and it developed me. So if you have those opportunities, even though you feel you can't do them, I would jump on them, jump on every opportunity.
I
It's
have
funny that you mentioned that, because that's exactly what I tell my students all the time. I never said no at the beginning, even if I didn't know how to do something. Like, say yes and figure it out, and then you'll find a way to do it. You'll like Chrissy said, you'll have people to help you too, probably in those places too.
can I just add a little more thing to what Becky was saying? This is especially particularly for girls and for women. We are, I think, my point of view is that we are a little overcautious, if you know what I mean. We tend to say, if we are not sure of what we can do, we tend to say, no, I cannot do this, or you better talk to other people who are more skillful than I am. So this is something that girls can cling to. Say yes, there to say it.
Yep, and then figure it out. This is for Chrissy. Actually, let me go to this one first. This is for everybody. When making beats, what suggestions would you have for non-percussionists? Could be a quick one.
I have a good one. So, my favorite thing for anyone who doesn't play drums is to actually purchase the song that you're liking, a song that you like the groove of, something that works as like a reference of some variety of whatever groove or beat. So if it's a trap beat, a dubstep beat, if it's like a bossa groove or something like that. And I always say purchase the artist, the original artist. You want to give them, their deserve what they deserve. But I say purchase so you can download it, bring it into your whatever you use for your DAW, and literally try to recreate that beat from scratch. Find what samples that they were using, for example. If it's a trap beat, like being able to figure out, like, well, does it have like a layered kick drum with like an attack and also like a tuned sub bass thing, or is it just like a kick drum? And what's the rhythm of that? Is there swing? Is there syncopation? All of that like can really be broken down. It's almost like it's like a research project almost on something that exists already within that genre. And that's a really good way, even if you're just focusing on one loop, like a 4-bar loop of that groove, trying to recreate it is like a really good way to understand like how those beats are composed.
And that's ear training. That's what I always say too. Now there is an app. I don't know if you know this app, girls, but there's an app I just learned about a few weeks ago. Actually, it's Moses, Moises, like backing track kind of deal. You can put anything in there. You can take the vocals out, the guitar out, the bass out. You can put it out as multi-tracks if you want to. Natalia or Becky, anything else you'd like to add to that?
I actually was going to have the same answer as Chrissy, reverse engineering. I actually wrote a blog about it where I take a song, kind of a simple, to me, I think it's kind of a simple song. It's Meant to Be by BB Rexa and what's that country duo? Anyway, I wrote a blog about it because I think that song you can hear things really clearly, and it's very simple. It's kind of 4 bars repeated the whole time. But that is the best way to learn about what drums do, is by reverse engineering, not just all of production, but specifically drums, because if you're not a drummer, it can be a mystery what drums are trying to do and the role that they play. And that, I would say the same for bass guitar. Until you start studying production, you don't realize that those are kind of the meat and potatoes of all music. And everyone thinks it's the vocals, but no, it's the bass and drums.
Thank you. Now, this is for Chrissy. Are there any particular genres you enjoy recording during your tutorial videos?
Oh, that's an interesting question. For tutorial videos specifically, I feel like most of my content with Berkeley Online is kind of like a hybrid pop kind of thing. You can check out, like, if you were to check out any of my courses with them, like, we produce from the ground up. Same thing. I have a free course on Coursera called Pro Tools Basics, and it's the same thing. It's like a sort of hybrid pop production with like programmed drums, synths, but also recorded live instruments, so bass, guitar, and voice. So I would say for that content, it would definitely be pop. But like for music that I really like, and I listen to so many different genres. I love electronic genres as much as I love like merengue. You know what I'm saying? Like I can listen to pretty much anything, and I like to record mostly. I mean, I don't know if I have a preference necessarily, but I really like acoustic music. I told you my background was in classical originally. I feel like there's still a part of me there that's really kind of I love an orchestra, you know. So there's a part of me that still really likes and that means like acoustic music across the board. So acoustic guitars or like acoustic piano and voice. Love all that type of thing.
Thank you. Now I have one for Natalia. Have you worked with English-speaking artists? And if so, how does that differ from Spanish-speaking artists?
Good question. Well, it differs in the way they expect some things to be done, obviously. Yes, I work with different languages than English artists. I work with Japanese artists for many records. I work with Brazilian artists who speak Portuguese. And long time ago, I worked in a big recording studio in LA, but this is like 20 years ago or so. I think everything relies on the relationship you establish with the artist. In that sense, language doesn't matter. I mean, what counts is the vibe that you build with the artist. They have to trust you, and so this in this language doesn't make a difference.
Thank you. I have one for well, it's for everybody, but Becky, I would like to throw this one at you. What's your number one songwriting tip, or your tip on how to complete songs? I have a tons of ideas, snippets, but I've only ever completed 2 songs.
Okay, biggest songwriting tip. If you had asked me this 3 months ago, I probably would have had a different answer. But for Christmas, my husband bought me the songwriting production course taught by Ryan Tedder. I don't know if any of you saw that. It was being shown at me all over the place in ads. And I was like, well, okay, I got to do it. Well, Ryan Tedder is a hit songwriter. And I figured he must know something that I don't, because I haven't written any hit songs. So I watched this course, and I would say that it wasn't the kind of course that you would take if you were just getting started. But what it did was it showed his process. He went through the process of writing 3 different songs. And the one big difference between him and any other writers I've worked with was that the melody dictated everything. The melody was king. And he will actually come up with like a little chord progression and a vibe, and then start sketching out melodic ideas with no lyrics, no idea what the song's going to be about. Just, I like this vibe, and here's the melody. And he would shape the verse, then he'd shape a pre-chorus and a chorus, and then he'd figure out all the details later, including the lyrics and including the story. I thought that was fascinating. So to me, I've always felt like I had to have at least some kind of lyric start before I could really get going on a song. And I've started writing the way Ryan writes, and it changed everything for me. So I would challenge any of you to do that. And your chord progression does not have to be fancy. Just 4 chords, repeat the whole time. There's tons of hit songs that only have 4 chords. If you want to switch it up, same 4 chords, just do them in a different order for the chorus, go for that. Trust your gut. And the other piece of advice for songwriting and completing, I would say, is making sure that your songwriting is, well, if you're having a hard time completing songs, then don't be afraid to collaborate, because that can push you and it holds you accountable with deadlines, things like that. But finding a good collaboration partner is a little tricky. It's like dating. When you're in a songwriting partnership, you can't just like, here's one good songwriter and another good songwriter, automatically they're going to be great collaborators. That's not true. They can be good with other people, but maybe not you. So find a good collaborator and make that push you. But also, don't be afraid to let go of a song if it's just not picking up, if it's not taking shape. If you have written something that you absolutely love, like the chorus, you're like, I love this, I just can't figure out how to finish it, find a collaborator. Okay, that's my 2 cents.
Anybody else? Thank you, Becky.
I can kind of jump into that too, because I think this is a common thing with songwriters, right? You have like a million ideas, or like little, like, especially if you're producer songwriters, you might have like a groove that was cool and you have no idea what to do with the lyric. Or so I guess this is sort of reflective of the way that I structured the online kind of educational material that I have, which is sort of separating. If you have a song, let's just say that you have like a basic demo, you playing guitar and like a vocal track, something like that, and you want to get it finished because it sounds good, but you're like, well, what do I even do with this? How do I produce it? What do I do? And the way that like I usually approach something is, if I have an idea and it's really basic, I think about it from the perspective of, well, if I have the song and the melody itself, the vocal line, how do I develop the rhythmic elements, any chordal elements, harmonic elements, and what do I need in regard to like any other melodic elements? And that means like thinking about, well, what's the groove supposed to be? And the drums coming first, for example. Okay, so I have this idea, but how does this sound? Is it electronic? Do I want live sounding drums? Do I want a real drummer, or do I want samples? That could be question number one. And then after that, it's like, okay, well, I had a piano here, but maybe that would sound better on an organ, or maybe that could sound better on acoustic guitar instead. And it's thinking about like, well, even if you have a simple idea, well, what are the ways you can flesh that out into like a full-fledged song? And that also means you can decide, like, for example, if it's just acoustic guitar and voice, you could say, well, okay, ask about the rhythmic side. You could also come to the realization that this song doesn't need rhythm, like it doesn't, well, it has to have rhythm, but it doesn't need percussion, for example. And you could come to that decision, but you have to kind of ask yourself that kind of stepwise. And that's what I found has helped for me. Well, does this need drums? And if it does, what type of drums? And if you decide the style, then what type of samples? Does it need chordal instruments? Is it a piano? Is it going to be, for example, a synthesizer? It could be anything, guitar, horn section. And then I'll think about the vocal production as well. Like, are there harmonies that we can have here? any ways to build any oohs or ahs. And I usually will separate it out into each of the layers of the production and focus on one thing at a time. And that could also mean maybe it doesn't need a part of that, but if you focus on each part, you can kind of figure out how to make up the missing pieces. And I also, like, as somebody who like mixes most of my own, well, pretty much everything that I do, I'm a self mixer. If anyone else here like self produce, self mix, anyone like that? Maybe. Yeah. Okay, cool. So if you do that, it's also really helpful to like separate mixing and production as two separate things. Because especially if you're like mixing as you go, you kind of even don't even know where you're at through the process. Whereas if you're only focused on production, you're thinking about content creation. You're not thinking about the aspects of mix. And then once you're happy on the content, then switch the gears and think about, okay, well, how does this sound in terms of pitch and timbre or EQ? How does this sound dynamically? What about my compressors? What is the space that this song is in? Then you're dealing with reverbs. And it's like a step-by-step kind of process is usually how I mean, can kind of get myself further with something that kind of started in a very basic demo form.
What is it like to produce music in collaboration with other artists?
I can jump in on that. So most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, I am creating music that is for someone else. My job is to be transparent and use my skills and my creativity, but it needs to be a reflection of what that artist has in their mind. Now, most of the artists I work with, they don't know anything about instruments, like they don't know anything. Which, I mean, I didn't either when I was first, singing and went to a studio and thought I knew, oh, I'm so talented. No, I'm just kidding. I was never like that. But, we don't know what we don't know. And I'm a little embarrassed at how I didn't know anything when I first got started. So a lot of artists are just really depending on me to capture their vision without them being able to verbalize specifics. And that has been and continues to be one of the most challenging parts of being a producer for another artist, for another creator. You really have to put your own ego like way in the background and make it all about the artist that you're working with. And it doesn't mean you can't bring your creativity. As a matter of fact, you're bringing your creativity, but it has to be in line with their everything, with who they are. So I would say if you're collaborating or are hired by an artist, the more you know about them, the more you know about their tastes, the things that they like in their music, their favorite artists, their favorite brands, the more you know, the better chance you have of lining your creativity with theirs.
That's great.
I have something to say about that. You're kind of a transducer when you are acting as a producer. You have your creativity is based on how you translate the ideas, especially when you're working like Becky was saying, with artists who really don't know anything about musical instruments or genres or how to express their ideas. So what you have to do is be creative in the way you show how you understand what they are saying.
That's I think that's the key. Like Becky and Natalia both said something that I always mention to my students too, especially to my production students. You have to know the people. You have to know the artist. You have to know what they like or they don't like. Sometimes you are collaborating with somebody and you say something that puts them off for the entire day after that. It's like, oops, what I said is not happening anymore. So what she or he was doing is not happening anymore. So we need to move on. But yeah, knowing the people and reverse engineering things is what it is basically. Let me see. How much do you keep up with new music technology? Do you embrace new advancements or stick with what works for you?
Well, it's kind of difficult to keep up with the technology advance here in Argentina, because we have like a different exchange rate, and everything is when you try to buy something, equipment, you have to pay dollars, and $1 is 150 pesos, which means a lot. So you have to keep a lot of income. So at the end of the year, maybe you can change some of your gear, but it's very difficult to keep up with it, or plugins or whatever. I mean, everything is in dollars, and when you live in a peso country, well, it's difficult to keep up.
I totally agree with that. Coming from Dominican Republic, what Chrissy said at the beginning is really hard.
Yeah, I think as far as where I stand on it is super, thank you, Natalia, because I think that's a really important point about access and accessibility. I have a lot of people who ask about like AI or like immersive audio and stuff, which I think is super cool. But at the end of the day, I realize that most people don't have access to that type of technology, not even just professionally, but even in a listening environment. So maybe I stick to my own stuff, kind of like my little analog world, maybe a little bit too much sometimes. But I do think that, like, yes, there's some really cool, great new innovative technology. Like, I mean, even just like my MIDI controller here. Have you all seen these before? The Sensel? You can actually like change it out with like different like MIDI. I have the other ones. There's like a keyboard. There's all sorts of stuff. I mean, this is really, really cool. So for, yeah, like I definitely keep up with some cool stuff, within reason. But I do think that access makes a huge difference. And I think like the more that we can offer, educationally, or like even like showing people things or like demonstrating, I think we should always, I always keep accessibility in mind, at least for me.
Good. I have two more questions, and it's 2:52, so we have about 8 minutes, unless you want to keep going. But no, we have 8 minutes. When writing, I find myself falling into the trap of feeling like it all sounds the same or too similar to other things. I've heard before. Have you all ever experienced this? If so, any advice to move past that hang up?
Did you say similar, like they all sound the same to something that you've already heard before?
Yeah, that's what he says.
Oh, I would say collaborating is a good way to get out of any kind of rut. Also, thinking actually logically about, specifically about melodies. I think if you are in a rut, you can figure out what is that rut. And if you feel like your melodies always stay within like a 5-note range, well, then you got to bring attention to that, make it conscious, and then change it. Don't stay in a 5-note range. Try something different. Try an octave jump. If it's like, man, my rhythms are always the same, then change it. Don't come in on the downbeat, come in on the end of the downbeat, or come in on beat 3. Just changing things up. But first you have to be aware of what your rut is. If it sounds like something you've already heard, then okay, is it like 5 notes in a row that are the same as this other song? Then instead of going da 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 da, go da 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 da, like invert it. Just find a solution to that one little stumbling block. If you kind of micro look at it, it's actually pretty easy to combat that, I think, in my opinion.
I would definitely say that you have to focus on what makes you different from other people, other artists, or other musicians. You have to focus on what makes you stand out and work on it. I mean, I don't think that Bob Dylan or Tom Petty were worried about how the songs were similar to one another, because they were distinct. from the rest of the artists. That's more important for me than the song in itself, to becoming like a very distinct artist.
I have like a really quick anecdote answer to that question. You can start with a preset, but never end with a preset. That's it.
That was great, actually. Thank you. That's deep. That's really deep. So, Chrissy, is there some sort of online written checklist that you can recommend for those processes? Which processes? I don't remember what this was about. Dakota, what was that?
I think she was talking about the like processes of like going through while you're writing a song.
Like the kind of like rhythmic element,
Yeah.
oh yeah. I don't have a list, but maybe I should make one. I should make one. That's a great idea. I'm gonna make a note.
Profit off of that. Yeah. Do it.
It's a great idea.
There are many questions regarding writing and songwriting, and there aren't many technical questions.
That is true. Guys, well, let's talk about the technical stuff. Let's begin with the basic things. Like, a lot of my students ask what DAW, what DAW they should buy or use. We do here Digital Performer, Pro Tools, Reason, different things. But what do you use for your work?
90% of my work is done on Pro Tools. But when I am building like the demos or the ideas of the songs, I sometimes work with Ableton, because I think in my opinion, it's a little more creative than Pro Tools, which is like very structured and a very engineered mind, in my opinion.
I pretty much do 50-50. If I'm producing and writing, I'm in Logic. And if I'm mixing or recording, I'm in Pro Tools. I think I'm right down the middle, like equally in both for me personally.
So I'm kind of the black sheep in the audio world. I learned, the producer that mentored me was working on Sonar, which is now known as Cakewalk by BandLab. And that's what I learned on. And I know it like the back of my hand. I'm very comfortable in it. So I think the argument is always about, you know, what's the best DAW, and the answer is whatever DAW works for you. I love Cakewalk, and right now it's free. The same version that I have, that I'm sure over the years I paid, you know, hundreds of dollars for, is free right now. There's also like an app version where you can just put together loops, but the full DAW version that you can download. And it's because I'm a PC person. I totally tried to be a Mac person. I just can't. So Cakewalk is for PC people like me. So there you go.
That's great. You know, you mentioned something though that is really interesting and actually factual to me too. It's the one you learn on, and whatever you can do with that, that's what it is. For me, I learned in Digital Performer from the beginning, and then Logic, and then all the others. I mean, I've been, you know, I have my things on all of them. But like Natalia and Chrissy, I always use that and then Pro Tools. Pro Tools is the last one always for every project. So when I'm mixing, I'm always mixing in Pro Tools. I never mix in anywhere else now. But when I'm composing, I use either Finale or DP to do that, or Logic nowadays. We have about 1 minute. Girls, thank you. Thanks a lot for being with us. I hope this was, guys, and everybody in our virtual audience, I hope this was entertaining and informative. Oh yeah, please give us your information, your contacts, girl, so everybody can access or have access to that. I am recording this. I am posting this later for everybody. I don't think it needs too much editing, so I might just give you the link, and I will put it out there. Any final question before we move on? Or any final comments from you three?
I am very, very grateful for being invited and being part of this meeting today. And thank you all for being here.
Likewise, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all so much, and definitely keep in touch. There are a lot of really great role models and mentors out there for you. Just start networking within the people that you know, and just keep in touch with as many engineers, professionals, producers as you can. And yeah, thanks for having us here. It was wonderful to meet you all.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you, guys. See you next time. See you soon.